Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is the Standing Committee on Transport and Public Works. Today is the 16th of March 2023, and we are gathered here today to consider and deliberate on vote 8, that being the newly established Department Mobility, and it's in the schedule of the Western Cape Preparation Bill B2 of 2023. So allow me to welcome you all present. It's many familiar faces that are known to me and some that are perhaps not as familiar to me now. I'm the chairperson of this standing committee, and it is indeed my privilege to preside over this meeting today. Allow me to establish whether we have a quorum before we start with the meeting. The members could introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, goeiemiddag, Medagani. I am Isaac Mbulelo Silegu, a member of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Silegu. This meeting was scheduled to be an in-person meeting, but due to circumstances beyond our control, we have morphed it into a hybrid meeting. So we have some of our members who are joining us virtually, and members who are in this meeting virtually. Could you kindly introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Chairperson, and good afternoon to members of the committee, as well as to members of the department. Can you hear me, Chairperson?
Loud and clear, Honorable Mvimbi.
My name is Lulama Mvimbi. Thank you very much. I'm present.
Good afternoon, Chair. Andrikus van der Westhuizen, a member of the committee, and thank you very much for allowing me, due to circumstances beyond my control. I'm not able to be physically present, but looking forward to this meeting. Thank you.
Welcome, Honorable Mvimbi and Honorable van der Westhuizen. It is indeed a pleasure to have you as part of our meeting. May I also indicate that this meeting is also live streamed on YouTube for interested parties and members of the public that may wish to acquaint themselves with the deliberations that are going to take place today. Allow me to welcome the Minister. Minister Mackenzie, it's your first budget meeting. Welcome, and I hope you have presided over many, and you have a different capacity today, and I'm sure you will do yourself and all of us, justice with the enthusiasm you've always displayed and the passion you have for the duties that you have carried out in the past. And I have no doubt that within your new capacity and role, you will do just that. Thank you and welcome, Minister. And also welcome to the HED, Ms. Gooch. We are not strangers to each other. We may not have association very long after April, but as it is for now, thank you very much for being here and having brought such a high-powered team along with you. And I'm sure as I hand over to the Minister and yourself, we will go around the room and the officials present will introduce themselves. Thank you so much, Jan. Are there any apologies that I may need to be aware of?
Chairperson, just from Member August, submitted an apology.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jan. Now that that is sort of out of the way, I'm going to hand over to the Minister for a few opening remarks you wish to make before we commence with the vote. Thank you, Minister. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Can I just get a team to introduce themselves before I make our opening remarks? And my name is Ricardo Mackenzie.
As you wish.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Jackie Gooch, HD Transport and Public Works.
Good afternoon. Let me apologize for being late. I got trapped on another side of the building and couldn't get out. Kyle Reinecke, DDG Transport Management.
Good afternoon. Chantal Smith, DDG Finance, Transport and Public Works.
Good afternoon, everyone. Theodore Bernard, Chief Director, Transport Operations.
Good afternoon, everyone. Farrell Payne, Acting Chief Director, Traffic Management.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pauline van der Merwe, Chief Director, Supply Chain Management.
Good afternoon, everyone. Shafida Andrews, Chief Director, Financial Management.
Good afternoon, Rian Wiggle, Director, Fleet Finance, GMT.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Yasir Ahmed, Chief Director for GMT and also Chief Director for Transport Regulation.
Good afternoon, Antonie Jansen van Rensburg, Director, Fleet Services, GMT.
Thank you so much, Minister. May I introduce Johan Coetzee, our procedural officer, and also our committee assistant, Mfundu. Welcome. Thank you. Now that you know all of us, Ministers, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. And thank you for the opportunity. My first committee on this side of the fence. It was always nicer and easier at that side of the fence. I'm disappointed member van der Westhuizen and member Wimby is not in the house today, my first appearance. I would have loved them to be here. But nonetheless, thank you. Let me first say thank you to the team in this department. Chairperson of the last few days, 3 weeks, but also a few days ago, I've managed to get to know the team much better. And more personally, the personal stories of the team. Because sometimes when we are on the other side of the fence, we just look at the numbers and what they're doing and what they're not doing, And sometimes, including myself, we're very quick to criticize, not knowing that the pressures the teams are sitting with to solve these matters. And really, having been there the last few weeks, I've got huge respect and appreciation of what those people have been through, particularly the last year. Change is not easy. Change is tough generally. We've seen it at the beginning of COVID, we've seen it during COVID, and we've seen it post-COVID as we're now getting back to the economy. And the professionalism that the team has displayed, it's unparalleled. I haven't seen it. I've worked many places in my career the last 20 odd years. And I just want to say thank you for them. It has been a tough journey, but they've handled it with such professionalism that none of us on the other side of the fence knew the change they were going through. So I'm very privileged that I've joined this team as the executive authority, and I know that working with them, we're going to take mobility to the next level because they've laid a great foundation. My predecessors have also laid a great foundation. I think with the spirit in which this budget was prepared, I can only say I'm proud to be part of the Western Cape government, and I'm proud to be part of this team. And I'm not going to go through my formal speech that I prepared because I think it will take away from the spirit in which I started. So I just want to say thank you, guys. Thank you for being a great team. And I hope I could take all of them, Chairperson, but I can't. So yeah, looking forward to, and then obviously we're here to answer all your questions that you have. And where we don't have the answers, we'll bring it back to you in writing. I can assure you that. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Minister. So yeah, we look forward to a continued good working relationship with yourself and the team. I'm sure we have always gotten that in the past, and I don't think anything will change in the future and today. Ms. Gooch, it's up to you.
Chair, thank you very much. We've prepared a brief presentation, perhaps as an intro and an overview of the budget for the committee. If you would allow me to make that particular presentation, I have provided copies to the members. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that there wouldn't be a couple in the House, but certainly I'm happy to provide it electronically to the committee coordinator for circulation to the members as soon as we're done, if that would be acceptable to you. Just if I may say, and yes, I'm going to display it in a moment. Just before I start, I would also like to just say thank you very much for the opportunity, and also upfront, if I may offer for an opportunity for the committee to engage on behalf of Minister and the team on the new strategy and the new approach that is enshrined in what this department is going to be trying to deliver over the coming years and in the strategic planning period, and understanding that the budget that we're presenting to you today is really aimed at just setting the starting point, a foundation. There's a lot of work that needs to flow from here into the coming years with some really exciting times and opportunities, but I think it sets a starting point for the team. So if I may move across to make the presentation.
Thank you. I'm tempted to ask you to dispense with the presentation because I'm under pressure because the previous committee that sat early in the day, gone through their deliberations in record time. No, but I'm only joking. I think we should do it.
It's entirely up to you, Chair. I don't mind.
No, please.
I can present pretty quickly. The team.
No, there's no rush.
Do a freight train.
We have set out a time till about 6 till after the rush hour traffic. So please take your time. Thank you.
Chair, I'm not certain. I'm hoping, Johannes, you can see the presentation on your side so the members online could see. Am I audible if I stand here? Yes.
But I don't know for the members online. So maybe we should
Would you mind if I sit?
Not at all.
Just so that I can then move the slides? Thank you very much.
Simply not.
So, Chair, as to try and give you a sense, and the committee a sense of the budget for the Department of Mobility from the 1st of April, you will see in the budget vote 8 that the total budget for the first financial year is sitting at 2.953 billion, just shy of 3 billion rand, which is slightly less, 1.81% less than the adjusted estimates that would be allocated to the equivalent of the Department of Mobility in the current financial year. The reduction in the budget is really because, as the committee would be aware of, the Blue Dot taxi pilot that was ended during this year, as well as then the decrease in the license agency fees. And I'll pick up on that particular point later in the presentation, where the Department of Mobility is required to pay the agency fees to municipalities for the motor vehicle license revenue that is collected. And there is a decrease in the allocation that the Treasury has put into the budget for the Department of Mobility. Thereafter, the budget increases, but as you would see, it is really an inflationary increase, particularly linked to the Public Transport Operations Grant, and that is then increasing at 4.5% per annum. The Public Transport Operations Grant, of course, being an allocation from the National Department of Transport as a subsidy towards the scheduled bus operator that operates mainly within Cape Town. However, there are a few additions to the budget for the Department of Mobility. There's 50 million rand in 23-24 for the Integrated Transport Hub. And I do think, if I recall, the committee members have previously, not everybody, I think with some of the changes, but have previously seen the work of the Transport Hub, that show and tell out at the Jean Low Traffic Centre, Traffic Training College. And there are specific areas that have been provided for in terms of funding as part of the 50 million rand for the Transport Hub. It's linked to the Public Transport Regulatory System. So that's integration of that into the transport hub, the development of the hot list functionality that you might recall the team have spoken about previously within the law enforcement space, and then a couple of other aspects, particularly something that's important for the department, which is the life events management system, understanding what particularly the law enforcement teams and our officers go through, what they experience. It's often trauma, and that's come through some survey and work that the team have done in order to look at a program for the new financial year to respond to the well-being of the staff of this department, which I think is vitally important. Then there's an allocation of 74 million for the George Integrated Public Transport Network, specifically to support the rollout of Phase 4A. That is due for rollout before the end of this financial year. Then there are two small amounts linked to the new department setup costs, strategic capacity, as well as in the integration linked to refresh, and that is specifically also linked between the Department of Infrastructure and the Department of Mobility, because there are business processes and elements that connect the two together, and therefore there's some financial support for that. And the final one is for operational costs for the traffic law enforcement team. Key projects are listed on the next slide that you'll see. So the Department of Mobility sits with the Program 2 now, Transport Operations, and a number of key projects that have been listed. They shouldn't be new to the committee. You would have recalled that in the adjustments budget in the current financial year, Transport Operations received some money to do a business case around a public transport voucher scheme. So it's to take that into the new year, as well as then the bicycle distribution program, which is something that the team are also very proud of, that makes a direct impact and difference into communities' lives. Program 3, Transport Regulation, that you see there, the funding and the key projects linked to the road safety campaigns, of course, and always on, or the 365 days. It's the fact that this is not road safety campaigns when you have a festive season or you have an Easter weekend. It's the fact that road safety is a priority and a focus every single day of the year. And that is something that also when you engage with the public and you see some of the comments on platforms, there's that response. Don't just come up with a campaign over a festive season. This is something that's important all the time. Then you see some other aspects that are listed there, including legislation, looking at the standard conditions for operating licenses and the introduction of some technology in that environment. Chair, going back to the numbers slightly, in this particular budget, you will see that there are earmarked allocations amounting to 214 million, or just a little bit more than that in the first year, dropping down to 194 in the second, and back up slightly 198 in the third year. Those earmarked allocations are specifically for the George Integrated Public Transport Network, as well as the Integrated Transport Hub. Priority allocations have also been made by the Treasury, amounting to 606, just shy of 606 million, 631 and 657. And that particularly links to the personnel upper limits. So if you recall, there has always been a focus for the last few years around COE, curbing COE expenditure. So there are upper limits. One must, however, note that in the process of refresh and the split between infrastructure and mobility, this is an initial indication, understanding that work will still need to happen and resolve itself in the year that's coming. And then a number of other items link back to the points that I mentioned of the allocations that the Treasury has made. It's often useful to understand the sources of funding when we're looking at the budget, and I'll kind of deal in the next couple of slides with what that means. But in effect, this particular department gets 968 million from an equitable share allocation. And while it seems like 2.9 billion is a lot of money, 1.1 is actually a conditional grant. So that immediately means that really within that environment, you've got very limited room to maneuver. From the revenue fund, 2 million, and then of course, again, from the motor vehicle license fee. So in other words, based upon revenue collection, there is an allocation. And it's important to understand that there's also the agency fees that need to be paid. And there are motor vehicle license fees that come into this particular budget, and also that will go into Vote 10 infrastructure. If you recall, historically, motor vehicle license fees have also been used to fund road infrastructure. The composition of the budget then, if we're saying that 39.9, for all intents and purposes, 40% of the budget is the PTOG conditional grant. So out of your total amount, 40% is already allocated from a conditional grant. Your compensation of employees sits at 17% of the budget. Earmarked allocations at 7.2 and your priority allocations at 3.3%. Transfers to municipality at 8.7. And then if you're saying that your license agency fees make up 12% of the budget, so in effect, you have just shy of 12% left for all your other operational costs and so-called discretionary spending. Not quite sure. Oh, the connection has been lost. Is it still on your side?
Yeah,
I don't know, because it's running off the Wi-Fi. No, not happy. It's trying.
Members online, please note that we do have a slight technical sort of difficulty. As soon as we reestablish the connection with the platform from which the presentation is being flighted, we will then proceed. Thank you, colleagues.
My apologies, Chair.
All good?
Johannes, will you let me in, please? Let me just try and join again. No. Hang on. Proxy. It's the proxy. Apologies. Minister, this was your problem the other day. Should pick up now. There we go. Try again. Let's see. I think I've got it now. Just running off of a hotspot. There we go. Yes. Just changed it. No, but it's not on presentation mode on your side. Oh, is it on your side? Here we go. My apologies, Chair.
My apologies to you too. Ms. Good. So sorry. Thank you, Candice.
Thank you.
Okay. Colleagues, thank you for your patience, and we will commence with the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So I was indicating that it means that there's just shy of 12% left from a budget perspective that is discretionary, so to speak, to cover operational costs and other aspects. So it really does mean that the team, if something new comes along or there is a pressure point, they have relatively limited room to maneuver. The next couple of graphs is just to give you a sense of the breakdown per budget program, and to give you the trend across the financial years in comparison to the current financial year. You'll see administration relatively consistent, transport operations, however, that one shifts, it drops into 23-24, and then slowly but surely rebuilds up to 24-20 to the final financial year of 25-26, and then a slight increase for transport regulation in the outer year as well. Per economic classification, you will see, of course, that, as mentioned, a fair proportion allocated for COE, also increasing in rise in line with the necessary inflationary increases. Goods and services will drop and slowly but surely increase. And then, of course, the transfers and subsidies, that one is seen. The capital allocation that is listed there in the main is for the fleet requirements in terms of the department's responsibilities towards the fleet payments to GMT. Then, Chair, the final slide is just to give a sense to the committee that there are some risks which I think is important to understand within the budget environment for the Department of Mobility. The first one is, as I mentioned, the license agency fees. So there's been an initial allocation, as I mentioned, from the Provincial Treasury, but the department anticipates an increased collection. Now, of course, as you increase more, that means that your fees that you pay are going to be more. And that then already puts the department at a difficult space and is going to have to argue in the adjustments budget for additional allocations, probably in the estimated round of 70 million or so. Then, because we already in this financial year have been looking at a collection of 1.9 billion with a fee of 399 million. And next year we estimate a higher collection of just over 2 billion, but we've only been allocated the ability to pay a fee of 353 million. So there is already an indication of a shortfall. Then the second one is one I think that's important to understand, the Public Transport Operations Grant, acknowledging that over the years, and I think we have mentioned this in the committee previously, that the increased fuel costs, operational costs, particularly running a bus fleet, means that the current operator has to start to reduce their kilometers that they're able to operate on the basis that the subsidy allocation is not in keeping up and keeping pace with the actual inflationary costs in this environment. As a result, the estimated shortfall in the new financial year is about 311 million rand, which will amount to between 7.5 million and 8.6 million kilometers that need to be reduced in the service. Now, that doesn't seem like a number that means much. And if you were to then translate that into passenger trips, it comes down to in the region of 164,000 passenger trips that can't now be carried by the bus service, but clearly people still need to be transported. So one must understand that they're going to shift mode, and unless and notwithstanding the excellent work and the focus on bringing the rail system up, of course, in all likelihood, they would be moving into a minibus taxi space. That will then mean more vehicles are required on the road, and therefore, once again, increased pressure from a potential congestion aspect. Then the last point, Chair, and then I will close, is just to note that in the refresh process giving rise to the Department of Mobility and the Department of Infrastructure, the approach taken by the Treasury just to get something into the budget is to take the Programme 1 administration of Transport and Public Works and to have split that 50-50 between mobility and infrastructure. However, there are parts of that that should actually be, for example, with infrastructure, certain programs. And so in the adjustments budget process as well, in the coming months, the Program 1 administration budget is going to have to be looked at in great detail and the appropriate shifts made into the adjustments budget. So the Standing Committee can expect a fair amount of shifts between votes come the adjustment budget time. And it does mean, in some respect, that the number that's currently within the budget isn't a true reflection of what is likely to be or required within the Department of Mobility. Unfortunately, that is what was necessary in order to make sure that we could get the budgets done on time. And the other final point is that Program 1 administration, you would have seen from the documents, is going to be in the main managed through a management arrangement, and the teams are consolidated for a period of time for training and development, and then for allocation and splitting between the departments of mobility and infrastructure. So there is still some work in the coming year as far as administration is concerned. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Gooch, and that was quick. So colleagues, colleagues online, are you still with us?
Indeed. Yes,
Honorable-
Chairperson.
Great. That was the end of the presentation. I'm going to open the floor for questions on what was sort of presented to us and what perhaps was not presented to us that you may wish to interrogate. So colleagues, Jan, jy gaan vir my aandui wie die ander nie. You will indicate. I can't. I don't have a computer in front of me, so Jan will assist me in that regard. Indicate your desire to make an input. Please indicate, and we have one member in the House, Honorable Sileko. So, and he's also a new member. He reminded me. So let's take it from there. Okay, we will start with Honorable Sileko, that's in the House, and the Honorable Mbimbi and Honorable van der Westhuizen in that order. Thank you.
My hand is up, Chair.
Okay. Yeah.
There's another member, Member Mkondlu. Welcome, Member Mkondlu. I recognize you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity, and also for the disclaimer that I am still new. So, and it seems like there's a lot of newbies here. The minister is new. I'm new. The ministry is going to be new. So, and firstly, I would like just to welcome the words from the Minister Mackenzie. And what I picked up, or what I could take out of your opening remarks, was the issue of a foundation, and also in terms of change coupled with emotions, and also taking into consideration that from the 1st of April that it will be on its own, it will be separate, and that it will be a new department. So when one hears such words, then one would want to know what is your role in terms of the kind of questions that you are going to ask, or are you going to scare this new baby and it won't actually fulfill its own potential, or are you going to assist it to actually realize its own potential? You know, and when I say that, I'm talking about, you know, the passengers in the whole of the Western Cape. So my question might not be linked to the numbers, but maybe trying to deal with the issues of emotions, especially when it comes to passengers, you know, from moving from point A to point B, you know. And I'll start with page 339 in terms of your program 2, where it says continue to develop and implement initiatives to formalize and improve minibus taxi services in the Western Cape. I think, Minister, and the department as a whole, last week we were in the public service, a citizen in Daba. And one of the questions was that, or one of the complaints has been like that, especially from the taxi owners, which is an informal sector within our province, where it comes to licensing. So the complaint has been there that whenever you want to formalize yourself or you want to legalize yourself, you are sent from pillar to post. When you go to the province tells you no, go to the municipality. Then the municipality tells you no, go to the province. And people get frustrated. And then as a result, people, they will just go illegally because they are not getting any help. So look, going forward, Minister, what is it that you are going to do as a department to make sure that you reach out to such up and coming businesses to feel that if you want to formalize your business, that there won't be any red tape, that you will be assisted, and that is the first one. And then the next one will be on 347. And I might be incorrect, but I think if this one talks about rail, and unfortunately there are concurrent functions, or some are national functions, but they are implemented on the province. And looking at the reshuffling of the national cabinet, what is it that has been done, or what is it we are willing to do to make sure that you reach out to your national counterpart, to look at opportunities where we can devolve some of the function for the betterment of the residents of our province, to make it easier and accessible for them to go from point A and to point B. And also on my third one, it's basically dealing with the department, because I always feel, Minister, that our staff are indeed our assets. And also linking to your opening remarks that your staff has been through a lot, and now you are only feeling it. Now you are on the other side. Going forward, what is it that you are going to do as a minister to make sure that your staff feel valued, and that the change that is happening currently within the department, it's not something that is going to demoralize them, but also they will accept and embrace, and then they will take this department to the next level?
After can we pause and I'll open up for a second round. Honourable Mr. Leku, thank you for the questions. We restrict during the first round a maximum of 3 questions per member, and then we'll get the department and the minister to respond, and then we will open up for a second round of questions. Honourable Mvimbi, I recognize you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. And also, I would like to make use of the opportunity to welcome the newly appointed minister as well, and also congratulate him, and also welcome the new member as the longest serving member in the committee. You will realize that we are a very good committee that work very well with each other. We complement even in terms of questions as well. Minister, maybe if I may just ask maybe a direct question as a maiden question to you. It might be helpful while we are actually still new from the box, and with all the energy that you might be having. A direct question maybe to you, and maybe the HOD might also assist as well, but be preferable that if I can get your view on it, is around the issue of the Blue Dot project. Are you going to continue where the previous Honorable Minister Madikizela has left? because it looked like he is the person who seemed to have understand the needs and the challenges of the taxi industry. I know that most of the time the department always talk about the formalization of the industry. Will you be able to take further? I know that even in the reports generally, it has been mentioned that it's been highlighted as one of the most successful pilot projects, but for some other reasons, then it was stopped. The second general question, Minister, and also maybe to the department as well. Now, I don't know whether the issue of, because the department also deals with issues of spatial integration. Must we deal with that? If maybe that should be shelved for the infrastructure department, I'll be happy with that. But maybe if not, are there any plans generally where the department has identified spaces or properties of government, immovable property in the form of buildings or land, to give effect to spatial integration? Is there such a plan as well? And I think the last question for the first round is around PTOG, or the Public Transport Operational Grant, which I believe most of the time is used for Golden Arrow bus services. Is there no way some of this money, because the answer I've been getting for the past 3, if not 4 years now, is that it's prescribed by national government that it must be used for this purpose? Is there no way we can start using some of the money for purposes of subsidizing the taxi industry? I'm going to stop the Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Mbembe, for those questions. Honorable van der Westhuizen, you're up next.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I trust that the officials also have what we call the blue book in front of them, and that it would assist if I can refer them to specific page numbers. My first question, and I'm going to take it in a page order, page 348, it's table 7.1, fines, penalties and forfeits. And I want to link that also to vehicle licenses. I think one can expect, if we look at the historic figures, that particularly transport and transport operations were severely affected by COVID-19 and, the lockdowns that we experienced. And I do recall that there was also even a postponement for the renewal of vehicle licenses, etc., due to various problems also with that. So I can understand why certain of the figures have dropped since the 2019-2020 financial year. But I would have expected that we should be back by those figures. If you look at the traffic on our roads, if you look at the economic activity, etc., and yet it seems to me as if in terms of fines, penalties, and they were also called forfeits, that we are still quite significantly below the pre-COVID number or figure that we used to see. So perhaps if I could just get an explanation what is your explanation for this, what I find as a surprising figure. Then the second one is the transport operations, and I do see that that by and large is covered by a subsidy that we receive from the national, in terms of the national conditional grant. Perhaps if you could just expand a little bit on what that grant is used for, apart from things like, I presume, Go George, etc. Because I also would like to see to what extent are we as a province supporting initiatives such as the Go George initiative. Then on page 353, the compensation of employees. Now, in some of the other departments, we've seen that figure is into single digits, even as low as 3% we saw yesterday for some departments. Yet here we see a 16.8% increase in compensation of employees. Perhaps if we could just hear from the HOD why this figure is significantly bigger or higher than just the as far as I can see, the increases in salaries. And then my last question for this round, Chair, is on page 357, transport safety and compliance. I think we all have transport safety, as a very important factor, and this is a relatively small budget in terms of the overall budget for this department. But still, I see that there's quite a significant increase from the current year to the financial year that we are looking at now. 36% is a significant increase, and perhaps if we could just get some explanation as to what can we expect will be done with that additional funding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. And lastly, I recognize Honourable Kondlu.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to yourself, the new minister from the box, and also the colleagues from the department, the new department, not so new, of mobility. Chair, I just want to start with the last slide of the HOD on the budgetary risks. And I'm actually interested because I'm still trying to wind my head with this implication that we would have asked from day one when this thing of mobility and infrastructure split was pronounced, and in particular the implications to the organogram of the organization. And I'm listening to the HOD saying, part of the risk is that what is 50% may not necessarily, what that 50% split and its implication in terms of budgetary realities may not be so. Committee must prepare itself that you may have to come back and try to sort or try to bring the matter back to us. I'm interested to know what that means. What exactly would that mean? Because my assumption is that you would have been discussing these matters for the past 2 years since this announcement was made. And actually, you would have known currently what exactly are the implications of this in terms of the configuration, who in the admin, which functions are moving, who is not moving, because indeed, such has got serious moral pressures to staff. Actually, what is the morale of the staff given the myriad of changes that have been happening in this particular department? Perhaps you can also speak to that. But I'm interested to whether what you are raising would mean that there would be functions or there would be programs in the administration that would still increase the budget, and if so, to what extent percentage-wise or reduce? Do you have such an indication? Because when one looks at the Blue Book in 363, one sees that from salary level 1 to 7, in the 2023 to 23-24, there is already an indication of an increase in number of personnel numbers from 839 to 958. Same to what is called other if you can explain what that is from 87 to 113. And I think also if you look in transport regulation, that actually there's going to be an increase from 916 of personnel numbers to 1,051. So if you can just try and explain this to me. Again, HOD, if you look in if you look at the blue book in page 339 on what is in program 1. In program 1, there is an indication there of a spatial transformation platform. Can you indicate to me what exactly that is? And program 1 having to work towards jobs or job targets. What is that a job target, if you do have, and how will this particular program, if I understand what is written here properly, how is this going to be done by program 1? And then, Chair, my question then also says in the budgetary risks also that the HOD has mentioned, actually it spoke to something that I was looking and trying to find. Where does it feature in the budget? Transport planning, because I think we have been hearing so much and evidence has been placed on our table about the increased numbers, in terms of in-migration to the province. And I think also the HOD alludes to that fact in terms of the numbers. And he speaks about the risk when you look at grants and the shortfall that's going to be there. And now my question is, where is transport planning in this whole thing? Because this transport planning, whilst I think the other programs, which is operations and regulations, I'm not sure where exactly is transport planning sitting. Is it in both program 2 and program 3? And what exactly is happening there? Where is the long-term view evidence led, about the numbers and the demand? Because when also one goes into the book on infrastructure, to talk about the road availability in the province, both the one that is used by people, to walk, and that one for those that are driving. I'm not sure the extent to which, if we're to think about, if from a futuristic point of view, who is doing that work of actually trying to paint the scenario, given the numbers that we've been seeing, what exactly is the transport future demands? Is that work happening? And if so, is work that could be shared by the committee and its implication in as far as transport infrastructure is concerned? My last one on this one, Chair, is on the...
Thank you, Honorable Kondlu. I have allowed you to ask 4 questions instead of the 3. So I'm going to open up another round, and then you can ask additional questions. So I'd like you to pause there and allow the Minister and the Department to respond to the many questions that were posed to the members, and then thereafter I will open up a second round, and then you could ask additional questions as you like.
Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
in order?
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, you're welcome. I just want, from my side, I have quite, and I'm not going to ask 3 questions. I'm just going to link it up with the first question posed by Honorable Nkondlu with regard to the 50% split of program 1. And I want to link it with page 365, reconciliation and structural changes. To what extent does it feed into that reconciliation that is proposed there? Because as I know, that within the Department of Housing or Human Settlements, there also exists a similar kind of structure. And are we going to try to find sort of how we're going to establish synergy amongst the different structures that is being proposed, and thus does this 50% split in program 1 also seeks to address the structure that currently exists in human settlements? Thank you. Minister, I'm handing over to you. You can decide as to how the questions need to be responded to amongst your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm just going to give a quick overview of what I think that and my team can assist. All Mr. van der Westhuizen's questions, I think that the team can answer page 348, 353, 357. Member Nkondlo's question 363, 369. But part of Member Nkondlo's question I want to respond to about the transport planning. That's actually a very important question. Your question, Chairperson, about the 50-50 split, including somebody else also asked the question, Member Nkondlo as well, and I'll respond to the first questions of Member Seleko, Member Mvimbi. I think the second part of the question, Member Mvimbi asked about Golden Arrow. The department can assist, and if I miss anything, we'll come back to it. The first part of the question, first question by Mr. Seleko on the public service in Durban they attended, with regards to the licensing issues, etc. We've actually established a task team, Member Seleko, that to try deal with the operating licenses in the licensing matter. It is not, I also thought it was as clear cut to that, honestly. Yeah, I thought you could just come in, solve the problem, but it's not. But I can honestly say to the standing committee, we had a meeting with our guys and the PRE, and they've done incredible work in resolving some of those matters. The second part with that problem, we are working with our colleagues in the city of Cape Town in resolving to prevent, as you said, people going back and forth in reducing the red tape. In fact, 2 days ago, yesterday morning, myself and Mr. Yasir Ahmad had a discussion around a transport in Daba. And that actually is such an important question that Member Nkondlo has asked. There are 30 municipalities in the province, and there are tens and hundreds of thousands of people moving to the province. How are we planning for those people? How are we budgeting for those people? And that question, hopefully the answer to the question will help us in asking for more money from the government, because the Department of Mobility will have to draw up the framework. What is the municipality in George doing if 50,000 people move to George? What is the city of Cape Town doing? And that transport in Durban, hopefully we'll have it as soon as possible. Member Nkondlo will assist us in the transport planning to ensure that we plan for those people and how we accommodate people traveling on public transport, whether it's rail, whether it's taxis, whether it's buses. And I hope, Member Nkondlo, that that answer will come far sooner than later, so we can make provision and ask for more money to accommodate the tens of thousands of people that is coming to the province. So that's actually a very important question. And that will also, Member Seleko will assist us in reducing the red tape so that somebody doesn't have to go to the city, then to the province. And how do you ensure this get done sooner? And so a businessman goes up in the morning and decide to have a taxi business. That businessman don't have to go to yourself, myself, and to 2 or 3 other people. How do you make that process much quicker, sooner, to help that businessman that addressed you the other day? The issue of rail, I must say, 2 weeks ago, Friday, I found out our national minister was going to be at an event, and a gate crash event, and she was gracious enough to give me an hour of her time, and that was extremely important. And there we had the brief discussion around rail, and I've had a meeting with the chairperson of PRASA, the meeting with the CEO 2 weeks ago Friday as well, to discuss how we can move rail smoothly and far quicker than currently happening. I must give credit to PRASA. They've yesterday launched the test run on the Nyanga line, and in some of the videos was incredible to see. And I actually had a meeting this morning with Mr. Maseko to see what more we can do to help them. Because ultimately, as rail is fixed in the city of Cape Town, it will address a significant amount of our transport problem, our taxi problem, our bus problem. So we need to get rail functioning urgently. So I've so far established a good relationship, Honorable Seleko, and I hope that relationship will help all of us to unblock and get a central line moving urgently. We did have a meeting scheduled with the Mayor of Cape Town and the Premier this week, Friday. Unfortunately, the meeting was cancelled by PRASA nationally due to their some urgent engagement they had to do. They informed us the night before the meeting was cancelled. We accepted the cancellation because that would have also assisted us in dealing with the last issues of the blockages of the central line. I did literally send a message last night to the chairperson of PRASA, and he promised me he'll get back to me before the end of this week so we can have that urgent meeting to address the issues of rail. Your last question was probably the most important question. How do we ensure these professionals feel valued? They've worked in the department. The reason they are sitting here, because they are sitting here, they are professionals, and change from any government to any department is not easy. And part of that breakaway last week or Monday was to get an understanding about how people feel, because they know the numbers, they know the strategy, they know what's happening in these books, they know what's happening in the department. But how do they feel? Do they feel valued? Do they feel understood? And I think hopefully that will give me at least a base to operate from as to how we can, going forward from the 1st of September, to ensure that we don't lose the majority, or we don't lose highly qualified staff to other departments, to the city of Cape Town, to wherever. Because if people feel aggrieved, that's what they do. They leave. They might not leave physically, they leave mentally, which is probably far worse, because then you're not going to get any work out of them. So I'm happy that it was a good session, but we'll work on it. We'll continue to work on it to ensure that they feel valued, they stay, and they'll take. They continue to do the work what they've done, because they've done incredible work in getting us to this point, and we should not undermine that. Member Vimbi, the blue dot system. The blue dot system has closed or lapsed, if I can use the other word. That has been by my predecessors, as you know, last year. It is not on our radar for the foreseeable future. What I would really like to do is to see how we can get funding for it, whether it's national funding, whether it's grant funding, to try and bring it back, not only for the Western Cape, for the whole country. I am of the belief that we should assist our biggest transporter of commuters in the country, which is the taxi industry. How we're going to fund it, I have not figured that out yet, to be honest with you. And I don't think anyone has figured it out. That's why it wasn't been funded for the last 30 odd years. So I hope we can work on a framework and trying to resolve that project going forward. And yeah, I think that's my question. HOD Gooch.
Chair, thank you very much, Minister. Some of them I'll pick up, some of them I'll direct through to the team. So, if I may, the second question that Honourable Member Mbimbi asked about spatial integration and properties, through your chair to the Honourable Member, that is linked to the infrastructure vote. Because, of course, the asset portfolio, the immovable asset portfolio is vested and will be vested with the Department of Infrastructure. So perhaps if he's going to be in that committee meeting on Monday, he could perhaps pose the same question there. I do have a response, but I think it's more appropriate in that committee. Then the question around PTOG, and is there no way that that can be used for the minibus taxi subsidy? Of course, as it stands, the framework that is utilized for the grant is gazetted and stipulated from National that it is used for the subsidized bus operations. I do believe, and linking to a point Minister made and what the team have been working on and trying to interact with the National Department of Transport, to say over the years, there actually needs to be a stance and policy taken around public transport funding overall. And as opposed to looking at them at all separate little pots of money that almost compete against one another, rather than understanding what is your plan, what is the overall system, and then having the funding attached to respond to that particular system. You may find that in one province in the country, you may have a greater rail presence than in another province, and therefore you should be directing your subsidy and your funding allocation to respond to the overall plan in that area. So certainly at this point, it can't be redirected. That would be against the terms of that particular grant and its framework. And therefore, it would actually mean that the department would land up with unauthorized expenditure if it did so at this point. What the PTOG, if I then move on through your chair to the next round of questions, and if I've got my page numbering correct, page 348, the questions around fines, penalties and forfeits. in comparison to tax revenue and so on. So just to flag, of course, the motor vehicle license fee collections have increased and are projected to increase between what was in 2019-20. That's in about the third or fourth line at the top, 696 million, to 23-24 of 772 million. So there is certainly a substantial recovery and projection post-COVID. Of course, you might recall as a committee, there was a year that the motor vehicle license fees were not increased, but certainly the revenue is shown and projected as increasing. Then the fines, penalties, and forfeits, that in the main, if my understanding is correct, is around impound fees that accrue. So in other words, if a vehicle is taken to the pound and is required to pay the impound fees, and what you see here is we don't budget for that. You don't really budget for somebody to break the law. You're hoping that everybody complies with the law, and therefore the revenue that you collect from in terms of fines or penalties is something that's an addition. It's an extra over, and that's why you see that there is a zero projected. The audited numbers and the revised estimate that you see for 22-23 is exactly that, what we are anticipating, but not something that we then rely on as part of the income for the department. I hope I've sufficiently covered Member van der Westhuizen's question. Then what is the PTOG used for? That, of course, is utilized to subsidize the scheduled bus services within pretty much in the main, the metro area. So if I may say by name, the Golden Arrow bus services. So that is utilized to subsidize those operations. And then the question on page 353 about the COE, and that's linked to program 1. So that particular schedule, program 1 that you see there for compensation of employees, again, as I indicated and it links a little bit to Member Nkondlo's question about the 50-50 split. So what's happened is Transport and Public Works, of course, as a bigger department than what you see within the Department of Mobility. The indication was that they've taken the full administration program and then just split that in half between the two departments. So the 16.8% increase is out of kilter with what it would normally be and will end up being properly adjusted into the adjustments budget allocations. So that's where, unfortunately, you do see that particular number coming through. Because if you were to match it with what is intended and what will finally be within program 1, from a COE point of view for the Department of Mobility, it would be less based upon also the levels of posts and others. If I can then, page 357, sub-program 2.4, Transport Safety and Compliance. And there's an increase of 36.17% between what the revised estimate is and the 23-24 financial year. And through you, Chair, to the question, perhaps just to flag, first of all, the bulk of the road safety responsibilities from a budget point of view are actually vested in program 3. So they're vested within the transport regulation program, because that is where particularly traffic management is housed. So that's where the bulk of that particular budget would be vested. This is other parts of the transport safety programs that the team run, for example, fatigue management and others that the transport operations team are responsible for. The, let's say, out of kilter increase of 36.17%, what is the specific program that's been added here? I'm going to have to ask the Chief Director Transport Operations if she would be able to give that particular explanation. But I've also just been whispered here that it's mostly salaries in terms of increase. So it's to make sure that we're bringing in some additional personnel to support the safety program. So do you want to add something, Deirdre?
No, actually, I was just going to mention that of the 9 million, 7 million ECOE, 700 or 800,000 is its operational costs. And then we're left with about 1 million for projects, and it is the fatigue awareness campaigns, but also we do work with municipalities to identify hazardous locations. And, you know, it could be something as doing street lighting on a pedestrian walkway.
Chair, thank you very much. So thank you for that. And so what it's really saying is that particular program, while the budget for projects is relatively low, interventions are then based upon the people actually doing the work and delivering the work, going out to operations and interacting with drivers, with operators and so on. Then moving on, if I may, through you, Chair, to Member Nkondlo's questions. And the point around the functions and their moving and what sits within the budget is that to say that certainly the Premier, and I must just say it was a year ago, not 2 years ago, if my memory serves me correctly, made the announcement around the refresh program. And there's been a lot of work, and one understands that a fair amount of that is premised on trying to understand what the potential strategies would be, what the areas of focus are going to be, and a fair amount pending and waiting for a proclamation from the President to ensure that the departments can actually come into being from the 1st of April. That proclamation was only received on, I think it was around about the 20th of February, I think it was. And therefore, it was at that point that one can start to pull the budget elements together, which is very, very little time to be able to meet the deadlines that are required from a provincial budget perspective. There is also, in terms of the process, an indication, as I mentioned and contained in the documents, that the intention is to bring the administration teams together from human settlements and from transport and public works, combine them and put in place a program for development, training, capacity building, and then to be able to take that consolidated capacity and allocate across to the Department of Mobility and the Department of Infrastructure, so that the two departments are sufficiently supported and appropriately supported with the kind of capabilities that they need. In TPW, if we were to take just what sat in Program 1 and split that between the Department of Mobility and the Department of Infrastructure, we have had a strategy over the years where we have directed compensation towards line functions rather than the administration program, and therefore there were insufficient people to be able to serve two departments if we were to take the TPW capacity alone. That's why one needs to bring the human settlements and the TPW together, understanding that the human settlements team don't sit with the expertise to procure transport-related work. And we don't want to set the department up to battle from the word go. So by bringing the teams together and capacitating and then splitting them out, the aim is to make sure that the two departments have the best possible opportunity to fly and reach their objectives that have been set. So that is why one sees this amalgamation and just the split, because ultimately further work is required in the coming months. Where does transport planning sit? Transport planning sits within Program 1, as it did in TPW, and you'll see if you look at the details, departmental strategy and so on, there is an indication that that's where the transport planning work would sit. And of course, also the requirement, if one's talking about future scenarios, futures planning, understanding what the province would look like from a people point of view, a movement point of view, understanding freight and logistics and how that's going to shift over time. That all would be premised and sitting within Program 1 as a start, interacting then with the other parts of the department, as well as then with the Department of Infrastructure, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, and so on. So you would see it's articulated in the budget book that, for example, the Provincial Land Transport Framework, that is that one that sets that starting plan and framework for the province, would be undertaken through that particular team in the Department of Mobility. Then where does the point around spatial transformation, that's captured on page 339, fit VIP 4? So still remember within the provincial strategic plan, there is a vision-inspired priority around spatial transformation and mobility aspects. And so the point here and what we're trying to capture is that it is still the responsibility and onus placed on the Department of Mobility to understand that environment within the provincial strategy and acknowledge that while we are looking at spatial transformation from a property development point of view, there is also spatial transformation that comes into being from a transport and a connectedness perspective, and the way that the systems and the transport systems need to respond. So VIP4, if you look at it in the PSP, has got particular programs like Go George, that is listed there as a priority, rolling out subsequent phases, getting the rail service back up and running in terms of a priority, looking at future ideas around transport authorities, etc. Those are captured within VIP4 of the Provincial Strategic Plan, and therefore pertinent for the Department of Mobility. And the jobs question is that not only while you are delivering services are you obviously creating jobs in the way that you do work, but it's also important to understand that the transport system either helps or hinders people to access job opportunities, and in itself is something that can then respond. So links back to, for example, the voucher scheme and others as well. Chair, your question, the link to program 1, page 365. And the 300, did I get the page number correct? 365. Oh, the reconciliation of the structures. 365. This is a bit of an anomaly, and I may have to phone a friend on the finance team, but I'll do my best to explain. What has happened within the vote processes is that we've traditionally had vote 8 in the provincial votes as human settlements, which had a particular budget program structure of administration, housing needs, etc. But in many respects, you actually have to ignore that, because what they've done is they've just taken the vote 8 as a number and assigned it to the Department of Mobility. So the Department of Mobility now becomes vote 8. Unfortunately, I think a required table is to complete this in the budget documents, but there is actually no connection between the two other than the vote 8 number that is attached. And am I getting some nods? Did I get it right? Okay, so thank you. I passed that test. So so that's my understanding. Unless you'd like to add anything, Mujahid?
It doesn't reconcile to anything. So what we're showing is what the previous vote 8 structure was, which was human settlements, and what the new vote 8 structure is in mobility, as the HOD explained. Although the heading is a little bit misleading because it's not a reconciliation, so that's why it doesn't actually balance. You're actually just showing a before and after picture.
I think I've covered everything. I'm not certain, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gooch. Is that your final answer?
Yes.
You've passed the test. Thank you. Minister,
that covers it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gooch, and thank you, Minister and colleagues for the responses. I will then open the floor for a second round of questions. We will once again try to comply with the maximum number of 3 questions, and then if need be, I will open up the floor for a third round of questions. Colleagues, I will recognize the colleagues in the order that the questions were posed on during the first round. Select, if you have any questions, you may ask them.
Last round for me, Chair. Thank you. Now, to the department, it's good to see my city buses running. It's good to see Go George. But unfortunately, I'm from the rural areas, Minister. I was born and bred in Beaufort West. Did work in Theewaterskloof in Caledon for the last 20 years. And what one sees on the road coming to Cape Town from Grabo, you see people, pedestrians always hiking. And it's the same when you go to Napier, you see people hiking. And then it speaks to the element of safety. And there's a need. So, Minister, looking into the future, are we going to see a similar rollout of my cities, of Go George, in rural areas like in Beaufort West and Theewaterskloof and Titoorens, something like that, in terms of those strategies? And secondly, I used to ride the train for the rest of my life. it was very, very safe. It was reliable. And I've been listening to you in terms of trying to bring it back. But now my concern and my worry is that we are facing load shedding. You might get the trains back and they will be there, but they won't be going anywhere. What plans are there going forward to make sure you mitigate the impact of load shedding should there be, new views and new agreements in terms of saying, okay, let us make sure that we bring the rails back to us, to the people. I think those are the two questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Seleku. Honorable Murby, are you still on the line? You have any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I note the question that has been raised, the response from the Minister and the HOD around the issue of the blue dot. Is there no way, maybe, because on the same way, because sometimes when we are faced with challenges in the province, for example, the Premier was able to take 1 billion for a safety plan. And now there's another billion rand that has been taken for energy. Maybe is there no way that the minister can actually prevail upon the Premier to consider some allocation towards the formalization or the subsidization of the transport of the taxi industry, seeing that they are actually transporting more than 2/3 of our commuters. But also, Chair, there is also the issue that has been raised that there is we are considering there is a consideration for the introduction of a public transport passenger subsidy or voucher, so that there can be an improved access to work opportunities. Just want to check whether what mode of transportation is it going to that is going to benefit out of this voucher system. Is the taxi industry also part of this industry that is going to benefit out of this? And also, maybe the last question then, Chair, is that there seems to be quite an improved use of consultants there's always big amounts that are actually being used for consultant purposes. I think there's an amount of 306 million that has been actually put, that is being reflected, that is for consultant purposes or professional services. Sometimes it says transactional advisor. I consider the department as one of the most competent and capable department that is actually employing highly qualified people. Is there a need to budget this amount of money for consultants purposes? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Mvimbi. Honorable van der Westhuizen, do you have any questions that you'd like to pose?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And unfortunately, I'm not quite satisfied with the responses I got in some of my first questions, so I will repeat that. Again, on page 348, when it comes to motor vehicle licenses, a year ago, I questioned the budgeted drop in income for vehicle licenses. And therefore, I was not surprised when the adjusted appropriation were done, that figure was increased quite considerably. Now, the increase from the revised estimate to the newly budgeted figure is 2.24% for licenses to be collected. Now, we have annually had a growth traditionally in South Africa of about 3% in our licensed vehicles on our roads. My question is, therefore, why would the Western Cape only budget for a growth of 2/3 of that of the remainder of the country? Is it that we are not collecting our licenses as we should be? Is it that we have less vehicles on our roads, which is not my perception, but please, or are we going to again see in this coming year that the adjusted appropriation will again have to adjust this figure because somebody has estimated this figure to be too low. And is there a strategy behind this? Is there a kind of tactic? Why is it that we underestimate this figure year on year? The second one is the one on fines, penalties, and forfeits. Chair, why would we, when some 3 years ago, the number that we collected was 3.8 million. In the last year, only collected 2.1 million for fines. We have equipped our law enforcement or traffic law enforcement vehicles with the latest equipment. We are proud of our investment that we've made. But if fines are not going to be collected, then I query that investment and whether it's being put to good use. So please, and my apologies if I've missed the explanation. Why are we less effective in terms of collecting of fines? Then also, Chair, in terms of the compensation of employees, I do see that there is going to be an increase in staff numbers, which then probably explains the 16.8, almost 17% increase in compensation of employees. But can I hear where will we find those employees? And not in terms of the table in this book, which would say, you know, in administration or in program 1 or whatever. I would love to see where will those increased staff members, where will we see them? Will they be in vehicles on our roads busy with law enforcement? Will they be behind desks? If we could just get some, if I could get some guidance in that regard. Thank you, Chair. And then again, transport safety and compliance, the 36% increase. Again, please, I'm asking for some more detail, but somehow between the explanation and myself, I unfortunately seem not to be able to grasp. Where will I see that difference? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Sorry, I was just briefly in conversation with Johan. Member Mkonlu, you have any questions that you'd like to pose?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Okay. Chair, can I understand in page 368 under program 1, I see, if I read correctly there, that there is going to be a percentage increase of contractors and also of entertainment almost at an 87.5%. And I'm interested to know if what entertainment is this that the administration is going to be involved in. Is there some parting that's going to be happening there, Minister Mackenzie? Also in page 370, there's a 285% increase on catering of the departmental activities by the Transport Regulation Program 3, including travel and subsistence, which will increase at 64%. So I'm really interested to understand what actually has prompted this kind of sharp increases on those spending items. Then, Chair, my second question that I wanted to ask in the first round is that I'm trying to understand, and perhaps the department can help me, because I'm not part of the executive and does not privilege, you know, in the conception of some of the innovation that they've came with. from the blue dot, red dot scheme to now, I think they speak about vouchers. Because this incentivized approach, which I think Member Mvimbi, latches on it from a point of further, the bigger debate around subsidization, which the minister also yields to. My issue is the sustainability, because as this now, the voucher is being raised here, one is interested to know how long will this project is estimated to take, how long, impacting how many, and what is the future sustainability in avoiding what would have happened with Blue Dot, that once you are finished, you then, start to want to rein in national government to say take over the program because it is said to be the best. So I'm interested in that, Chair, in just trying to understand that theory of change around this incentive, approach and in trying to drive new behavior and actually, whether this has there been any impact studies to prove their effectiveness. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Nkondlo. Minister,
Thank you, Chairperson. I was thinking of responding to Member van der Wester's questions, but I might not answer it properly. So I'll hand over again to HOD Goods to try and answer those 3 questions. And then Member Nkondlo and Member Mvimbi, the second part, the voucher system, I think Deirdre and the team is working on that. Now, they'll respond to that because that was, that they are busy with the process, and I can hear where your answers are coming from. And then I'll respond to Member Seleku in the first part of Member Mvimbi's question. With regards to the my city to rural areas, if it was up to me, I would get more trains going, honestly. I think trains are the solutions to our problems. But as far as I can see at the moment, there is no business case to start a my city bus in small towns. It's just not feasible. That's what I see at the moment. I don't know what the future will would look like. So, but I think it is needed. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think our rural areas sometimes get the worst of the budgets. Or the big money always go to the city than the small areas. So I do think there's a case to be made. On load shedding and that related to trains, I follow the Metro Rail's Twitter account. City of Cape Town, I'm in Metro Rails, and I do sometimes see tweets coming through, train XY8 not running because of load shedding. It is a concern. And what's going to happen when all the trains come back? I think that's a discussion that we have to have with Metro Rail once all the train comes back, because once you have 80 sets running versus 20 and you sit at stage 4, it's a massive problem. So it is a concern, and how we deal with it. Member Mvimbi, I think there is a case, and one thing that I must say to the officials in all the meetings that we had so far, there's a strong case to be made about how do we assist the taxi industry. I don't know what that model looks like I said earlier in it, and it's a discussion that I really hope I can put that on, other than getting Central Line up and running. That'll be number 2 or 3 on my to-do list with the minister to see how we can build a case with the national government, because as you know, provinces don't have that kitty, to find the money and assist our transport partner, which is the minibus taxi industry, sustainably over a long period of time. There's a case to be made. The numbers are there. It makes perfect sense. How it looks like, I think the best department that can help us is National Treasury, because if you do it for the Western Cape, then Gauteng and any other province would want it as well. We've done it with Gautrain. There's a Gautrain still running. Billions and billions of rand project running sustainably in Gauteng. So there is a case to be made. How that must look like, I think only national government can tell us how it exactly will look like and how it will be funded. So I agree with you on that case. There is a case to be made. And I know the officials constantly look at ways and try and how we can do it. There's a strong case to be made. How it should look like, I honestly don't have that answer at this particular point in time. And then to Member van der Westhuizen, Nkondlo second part, and Mvimbi second part, Jackie and the team will answer. Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. And thank you, Minister. You've given us a bit of time to WhatsApp some friends along the way. So thank you. Perhaps just it may be pertinent then to ask Mrs. Ribbenaar whether you would mind to pick up on the voucher scheme at this point, picking up both questions that were posed in that regard. Thank you.
Thanks, HOD. Just in terms of the voucher system, so we're exploring the viability of introducing this voucher system, or one could call it a passenger subsidy. And it's really towards the sort of vulnerable, unemployed sectors in our communities. We've got money in the adjustments budget, 2 million rand, if I'm not mistaken, to do a business case. And that business case is nearing at the end. We should be done by the end of March, at the end of the financial year. We do scenario planning, Member Mavimbi, so there's no one mode that has been set aside to benefit from it. So we look at all modes and what would be the most practical or feasible in terms of that. Then in terms of Member Nkondlo's question around how long will this project take, so we have not received money for implementation, and one doesn't also want to preempt the outcome of a business case to say that it's going to be viable. So we haven't put implementation money, but we have set aside a small amount just to redo any work that may come from comments once the business case is concluded. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Then perhaps I can start to move on to some of the numbers, the questions that were posed. The first one was in relation to the allocation for consultants within the vote as a whole, which was the amount of 306 million. And to indicate what that covers. And so, yes, there is an incredibly professional and excellent team, but there is also a requirement to bring in and provide support and assistance on a number of areas. For example, that budget also covers the electronic monitoring that is required to monitor in terms of the public transport operations grant framework requirements to monitor the subsidized bus service operations. There's allocations for the data hub, so the integrated transport hub that has been mentioned a little earlier with the additional funds. You would recall in my introductory presentation, additional funds being allocated to support that. That's all captured in that space, as well as the Go George and the support that's required by the team to roll out and implement the Go George operations. There's a bit in there for the rail support program, as well as then aspects linked to road safety that are all captured under that particular economic item in the budget. Then to come back to the point around the motor vehicle license fees and others, the team, let me indicate, did want to put in a higher amount in the budget based upon our projections. Unfortunately, there was a view held that we should be conservative in our estimations, and therefore what is in the budget is what was agreed to be put in through the Treasury processes. So yes, through your chair to Member van Westhuizen, we do believe that in the adjustments budget, we're going to have to increase that particular amount, not necessarily in revenue to take into the budget, but could certainly then on the basis that it's collected be looked to be allocated in the new financial year for particular projects and programs that the team have. So I hope I have sufficiently responded to that particular question. The point around the item that's listed as fines, penalties, etc., just to indicate that the department and when our provincial law enforcement team issue fines, we do not get the revenue from fines. That goes to the relevant municipality within which the fine has been issued. And certainly my understanding and the information I've always received from municipalities and generally is that the ultimate collection of it, quantity of collection is relatively low. While the item is called fines, penalties and forfeits, because that's the requirement in terms of the budget item, this covers the impound fees. So again, we don't budget for impounding vehicles. We are hoping that everybody will comply with the law. So it's not put into the budget. And this then becomes what is actually paid, and the impound fee is paid on release of the vehicle. So we are guaranteed that if they don't come and collect the vehicle, they won't pay it. But therefore, it's not something that you've sent a fine in the post and you haven't then been able to collect the revenue. I hope I've understood the question and clarified it sufficiently. Then the question about where will you see the increase in staff, going back to that number that was linked to program 1. So that's the point about the teams being brought together and the budget just being split. So there isn't really an increase in staff numbers per se. This is a anomaly in the budget preparation in terms of the split of the budget that gives you that indication. But what you will see if you want to go and find them is you will find the finance teams, the supply chain teams, the strategy teams, knowledge management, all of those units, operational support, etc. Those are the people that the budget is paying for. So ultimately, if you were to put vote 10 together, the infrastructure program 1 COE, and the vote 8 mobility COE, you will actually get the number in terms of the personnel that are provided for. Then the question about the numbers linked to the the numbers linked to the road safety sub-program 2.4, transport safety and compliance, and that 36% increase. Those are in the main people. So you will see an increase in the COE from 4.6 million to 7.3 million. So there will be more physical people available, present, to be able to attend to and run more interventions in the transport safety program than what they've had before. Then through your chair, page 368, and starting to look at some of the deviations that were flagged, I may not, through your chair to Member Nkondlo, manage to write down all of them because I was starting to get information before.
There's no party.
No, there's absolutely no party. That I can assure you. The question around contractors, the 555 compared to what it was, that's a provision specifically linked to the communication side of things, graphic design and others that gets classified, that expenditure gets classified under that item. So that goes back to the communication programs and the road safety programs and so on in terms of that specific provision. Then the entertainment provision of 30,000 Rand overall is based upon the prescripts and the allocations that are provided for. You will see that even though it gets provided for, that doesn't mean that it actually gets spent. But if you don't have it in the budget, you also can't claim against it. So you will see in previous years what the actual amount has been and what the revised estimate, and potentially again on the basis that it's required that funds can be shifted within the adjustments process elsewhere. That was on page 368. On page 370, the questions there were linked to the catering under transport regulation and program 3. It's my understanding that part of the focus for the year ahead are specific interactions, training programs and sessions linked to transport regulation and others. If we go back to some of the comments that were raised right at the beginning about people also needing to understand and us working with operators, with applicants, etc., municipalities and others to understand the processes. That is a provision on the basis that you're going to have day-long also workshops, and one does need to provide some level of catering for that. So you see a substantial increase on the basis of there being a program that the team are intending to focus on in the years ahead. Then the other one was down near the bottom, travel and subsistence, and that is my understanding particularly linked, of course, with the provincial traffic side of things. And as we see an increase in numbers and operations there, one has to have a commensurate increase in the operational budgets that then go with it, Chair. I may have missed one or two, but I hope I've been able to capture in the main what the members have asked. Thank you.
Thank you so much, HOD. Colleagues, right, going to open up the floor for a third round of questions if you have any. I'm going to start in the same order that we've commenced the deliberations. Honorable Seleku, you have any further questions you'd like to ask? Any follow-ups? Honorable Mvimbi, do you have any follow-up questions you'd like to pose? Silence, yes. Honorable van der Westhuizen, any follow-up questions?
Yes, please, not follow-ups, but
new questions.
Move on to the Provincial Motor Transport Trading Entity, Chair. On page 361, at the bottom, we find the figures for the last few years, as well as the budgeted figure for the upcoming year. And again, I see that there have been quite significant movement in the amounts mentioned there, from pre-COVID, less than 700 million, then to last year, almost 2 million, which is quite a significant a change. And then for the upcoming year, 1,628 million. These are quite significant changes, and perhaps if we could get an explanation. I do note on the next page, 362, that there are two lines where we will find a lot of the changes. The one is in terms of the amounts for amortization. Now, my question is just, did we change the rate of amortization, or why would we have such vast differences? For the upcoming year, it will be 4 times the amount that we had 4 years ago. And then if we go down a little bit more, capital asset expenditure, there we also see, from only 73 million, we now see 590 million in the upcoming year. And then intangible assets at cost, from 2.5 million, we're now looking at 109 million rand. And again, you will see that figure over the years have changed significantly. Sometimes it's 2.5 million, then it's 227 million, then it has come down significantly, and now we have a 443% increase for the upcoming year. I believe there must be some explanation behind it, and I would love to hear that. Thank you, Chair. I have further questions, but if we could first stick with the Provincial Motor Transport, I'll appreciate.
Did you have further questions you'd like to ask, Honourable van der Westhuizen?
Thank you. Let me remain with those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Honourable Nkondle, do you have any new questions or additional questions?
Sorry, Chair.
Yes, Honourable Mvimbi?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, you were too fast for me when I was...
Okay, now, okay, good.
Can I come or must I allow Honourable
Sorry for that. Okay. Please pose your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson. I think it's one last question from my side. That's in relation to rail. I must say I welcome the seemingly positive attitude from the minister on the issue of rail. I know he's been very, very critical on the state of the rail and all that. It seems to have already hit the ground running in terms of being proactive on it. But I've also listened when the HOD was responding on the 306 million. I think he mentioned that some of the money is also got to do with rail, if I heard him correctly. But I just want to check whether, in view of the interest that the department now is having in terms of working with the National Department of Transport, in terms of resolving the issues of rail, in particular the central line from Khayelitsha to Mitchell's Plain, is there maybe an indication as to how much is really the department envisaging to spend in terms of this project of revitalizing the central line? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Mbambi. I'm going to hand over to. Oh, sorry, I was just reminded by Johan about Honorable Kondlu. Do you have any new questions or questions for clarity?
Yes,
Apology for
Chair,
that.
new questions.
Please proceed.
Yes, first one on page 339. I just wanted to understand, Chair, that when it comes to the review of the provincial land transport framework that is referred to, that will actually include a chapter on climate change. I wanted to check whether this review would also include any assessment or evaluation of the BRT that has been implemented in the province, which is Go George and my city. And I'm raising this because I'm sure almost, to date, the biggest chunk of the initial stages of this project have already, I think, been implemented. And I think it will be important if a review of such nature is being done to sort of include also Go George and my city and lessons being learned from that. So I just wanted to understand the scope of that review. Then my second one, Chair, is to ask, in this project that is mentioned of rolling out this distribution of bicycles or bicycle distribution program, how is this going to pan out? Where are these bicycles going to be sent? Who qualifies for a bicycle? If maybe can one just get a much more clearer understanding about this? Then my last one, Chair, is on the Western Cape freight strategy. Is this the work that has been done through the Economic Development Department? And if so, is it being handed over to the Department of Mobility? And what exactly is the department going to be doing? What is the strategy that they are referring to that they would be implementing on freight? Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Kondlu. I'm handing over to the department and the Minister to respond to those questions.
Actually, good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this one, I'm going to direct the team a little bit more to ask that Rian Wiggle, if you wouldn't mind, Director of Fleet Finance from GMT, respond to the questions that Member van der Westhuizen has asked. Those ones are bietjie bo my firma plek in some respects. I know some of the answers, but others no. And then I will pick up on one or two, and I must correct a statement I made a little earlier in relation to the rail question. And I will ask Deirdre whether she would mind, Mrs. Ribbenard, to respond on the PLTF review, the bicycle distribution approach, and the freight strategy. So perhaps do you want to start and then we go backwards? Thank you.
Thank you, HOD. Through you, Chair. Just in terms of the review of the PLTF, Member Nkondlo, there is a chapter in the PLTF around sustainable transport, green economy. So once that the PLTF is reviewed and finalized, we can then submit it to the standing committee. In terms of the BRT systems, Go George, my city, it's assessed on a quarterly basis by the National Department of Transport as well as the National Treasury. Those assessments we will introduce into the PLTF as a chapter under public transport analysis. Then when it comes to bicycle distribution, we are going to focus on Swartland municipality. So it's schools, primarily schools in Swartland municipality. So there's 100 bicycles there. Overstrand gets 100, Stellenbosch 100, and George 100. And then we also do some bicycle open days. The areas are still being identified. And then through the Shova Kalula program that we partner with national government, there's 300 bicycles that's going to be distributed to schools in Central Karoo. From a Western Cape Freight Strategy perspective, remember the Western Cape Freight Strategy was developed by the Department of Transport and Public Works, and Subsequent to that, we developed an implementation strategy that has various stages. The projects that we'll be doing this year, there's engagements with DDAT at the moment to finalize some of the institutional arrangements. Again, that list we can provide to the committee.
Thank you, Deirdre. Mr. Wickel?
Chair, through you, HOD Rian will go into a bit more of the detail, just a sort of a high-level response to the questions with regards to the increase in expenditure, specifically around non-current assets. That, of course, refers to our current program to recapitalize the fleet. GMT is in the process of replacing some 3,921 vehicles that have reached the end of their life cycle, their useful life cycle. So we're in a vigorous process now to replace those vehicles. You will recall that we come through a period now where vehicles were not readily available on the market because of COVID, the lockdown, the impact of the microchip shortage. So now we're playing catching up. And that, of course, also has a direct impact on the amortization figure, which will be higher because of the higher level of asset value that GMT now has. I'll let Rian answer, perhaps go into a bit more detail on the numbers in that regard, especially the intangible assets.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. And also considering if we're comparing it over a period of time, we have to keep in mind that some of the activity during the COVID period was very low. So if we taking the numbers, for example, the operating expenses from 576 million to the current value of 715 million. Obviously, it's activities such as the fuel spend, etc., that we all know has increased significantly over the last 3 years. For example, on the fuel, basically we're catering for this year 386 million compared to 246 million in the current year, just to give you a sense of basically the increase in the numbers. Obviously, we're comparing it to, we're calculating that by using the exchange rate, the barrel price, and obviously the demand for services as well. Chairperson, then on the intangible assets, the increase to 109 million, that was mainly due to a acquisition that GMT did for the intelligent transport system. It's basically a software system which we purchased. And there's a balance due of about 76 million, which we have to pay. And that's why the significant increase from 20 million to 109 million, the majority of that is towards that. But obviously we know to get a system like that into the production environment, there's some development work and that needs to be done to customize it according to client needs. And that's why there's additional capital that we're providing in terms of that. The vehicle acquisitions, that's what one would see in terms of non-current assets, as Mr. Ahmed has alluded to. We are catering for next year to buy 1,326 units at an average cost of 442,000. That's including the extras and the conversion elements as well. So basically that would be a wide-ranging list of items, for example, ambulances, traffic vehicles, etc., and our normal runners. And we are basically in the process of a expedited vehicle replacement approach. That leads then to the operating expenses such as depreciation and amortization. So because those two items go hand in hand, the higher the capital value of the vehicles that we're replacing would by implication mean that the depreciation expense automatically increases. The same with amortization. So the amortization and intangible assets go hand in hand. So as soon as that system is loaded into the production environment, then we have to cater for the amortization expense on that specific item. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I need to make one correction, if I may, from my previous input. I misread a line when I indicated the rail support. That one was from our previous programs, as you would know, our rail enforcement unit that we used to support. And I apologize. So actually part of that allocation is the transport safety side of things in terms of a program. So I do need to make that correction, please, and my apologies to the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Gooch, and thank you to the contributors to the questions. Colleagues, final round of questions. Please
Chair.
indicate if you have. I don't see your name. I think I've heard
Chair.
Honorable Vimbi.
Yes, I just want to check, Chair, is there going to be an opportunity for members of the public who would like to ask questions?
It's my meeting. You have any questions that you'd like to ask?
No, I mean there are members of the public who would like
Do
to
you
ask.
have any
on my-
questions you'd like to ask, Honorable Vimbi?
No, not
Thank you.
on my.
Thank you. Honorable van der Westhuizen, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. I see that for the long term, the prediction is that the computer costs will decrease starting with this upcoming financial year. And I find that quite interesting since we are going to see an increase in staff, since we do know that in general, computers have become a far bigger, or is playing a far bigger role in our working lives, etc. And I would want to know, why. And the page that I'm referring to is 367, computer services, which in the previous year ran at more than 150 million rand, and now for the upcoming year it will be less than a third, 30% of that figure, and then even dropping further for the year thereafter, the outer year of 2024-2025. I find that a very interesting figure, and I would like to know why is that the prediction. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable van der Westhuizen, is that your final question?
Indeed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable van der Westhuizen. Honorable Nkondlo, do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
Yes,
Final
Chair.
questions?
Yes, Chair.
Please
I may
proceed.
not have heard the response from the HOD in what are the jobs targets for this department, mobility. If she did answer with specific on that one, if she can help me with that one. Secondly, Chair, in page 346.
Page 346.
346.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair. I just want to understand, it says the department continued to explore the establishment of the Western Cape Transport Authority. This is under Program 2, which is transport operation. Firstly, I just want to understand, what does the national legislation say about this matter, of a transport authority, and what legislative enablements would then allow this establishment in the province, and why it is sitting in Program 2 on operations instead of Program 3, whilst it's about a regulatory function. So those are the two, Chair. I would like to get some answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Nkondlo. And perhaps my last question is, actually, just give me a sense of where GMT is fitting into this new structure, because usually, a separate budget is presented for GMT, and it's not part of mobility. Is it now just morphed into, or go along with? Just maybe that I didn't really pick it up, but certainly you will assist me in that regard. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. So perhaps just so that the team can prepare, I'm going to ask Advocate Reinecker to respond on the Transport Authority and the legislative environment. I'm also going to ask Ms. Andrews if you are able to pick up on the computer costs. So I see out of the total quantum, the bulk of it is allocated into Program 2, Transport Operations. So if you wouldn't mind just to give a sense of why we're seeing a decrease in the computer costs. I'll then pick up, Chair, your question and the other question from Member Nkondlo. So I did indicate in my previous response that there's no specific job target in relation to the Department of Mobility. Obviously, within an infrastructure environment, it's different. What the response is in terms of jobs and the job priority and responding to job targets is about the role that the transport system plays and the environment plays in supporting job creation and opportunities throughout the province from an economic perspective. So there isn't a specific job target attached. I hope I've perhaps clarified that one. If I missed it earlier, I apologize. The question around where does GMT fit in, Chair? So within the Department of Mobility, you will have a chief directorate that is responsible for in equivalent transport operations. Its name is changing slightly. You will have a chief directorate for transport regulation, and you also have the trading entity of GMT reporting in, as well as the chief director for the kind of finance corporate support side. So GMT will report into the head of department, which is at a DDG level. And that's exactly actually mirrored what the current situation has been within TPW, where GMT reports to the DDG of the Transport Management Branch. So TPW's budget, perhaps you might have missed it because, of course, it was a far bigger budget. And in the tabling, there's always been a section with GMT in it in terms of its allocations and how it's going to operate. But of course, here it just gets heightened because of the department that it finds itself vesting in. So it will report, as terms of the chief director of GMT, will report to the head of department of mobility. So if I may, Advocate Reinecker, I'll pass to you for the Transport Authority responses, and then through to Ms. Adams on Mrs. Shafida Andrews, apologies, Shafida, on the computer cost.
Thank you, Chair. So transport authorities are established in terms of the National Land Transport Act. And obviously the type of entity that you want to establish will depend also on what is in the PFMA. So the PFMA allows different types of entities, and it will require legislation to be drafted, which will focus on its roots from the NLTA, and obviously as I said, the type of authority that we are going to create will depend on what we want to do with that authority. But that work is still underway. So there are different types of entities. One is one that income generates and keeps the money for themselves, and others are slightly different. But a lot of those financial provisions and the founding provisions of that entity will be in a piece of legislation.
Right. So the reduction in the computer services is mostly attributable to a reduction in the data hub costs. Our computers is procured or is classified under another item, so that would be under capital items and not under the goods and services item.
If I may add, Chair, perhaps just a point as well. Of course, as Ms. Andrews has mentioned with the data hub, but also certainly the team, as you would have seen in my initial input and presentation, there was an allocation made for the department in the first financial year from the Provincial Treasury, but that hasn't carried through to subsequent years. So there's going to be a tall order for the department to call and argue for additional funding as they move into the new financial year processes. And that's why you then see a reduction as the years progress. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, HOD. This is an open meeting. Members of the public are invited to attend this meeting and to follow its proceedings. So as per custom, when we're dealing with the budgets or annual reports, etc., any of our meetings, we establish whether there are members of the public present, and if they are, and if they have not indicated to us prior to the commencement of the meeting that they would like to pose questions. We do provide such members questions if they are present to pose to the department and to the minister. And if that is so, I will then try to establish whether there are any members of the public present in our meeting to indicate. There are 2 members of the public present. Do you have any questions you'd like to pose? Yes. If so, please identify yourself and pose your question or questions.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. And my apology for coming late from another meeting. My name is Andile Peter. Currently, I'm the chairperson of the PRT National and also in the city of Cape Town. I'm the CEO of one of the VOCs of my city called Kitrogen. When I studied this document in terms of the land, the provincial land integrated framework, I've seen that even in terms of the budget of the province, it is very silent in terms of the VOCs, especially those that are coming from the taxi industry. Because what we have noticed, especially in the city of Cape Town, we have noticed that Golden Arrow, who's getting a subsidy from the provincial government, as is indicated here, they are also part and parcel of my city. And in our understanding in terms of government, we used to call it a double dipping. And secondly, us that are coming from the tax industry, that are part of the PRT today, we have been stagnant for almost 10 years in the city of Cape Town. We have been getting the same salary for almost 10 years now. There's no increase. And we tried the national government to intervene. Unfortunately, it is not easy for them to intervene at the local level. And now when we look at the integrated provincial transport plan, it is very silent on our costs. There is a budget for the mini taxis. And unfortunately, even then, we are restrained from being a taxi people anymore. Because when we introduced to the BRT, part of our commitment was that we'll never go back to the taxi industry. Now we are suffering within the city of Cape Town. We are taking each other to court in terms of the implementation of the contract. Instead of them looking after us, they rather pay the lawyers in terms of implementing the contract. Now we are coming to the provincial government in terms of saying, you can't intervene in terms of our challenges. That is question number 1. Question number 2, what is your role in terms of expanding my city within the city of Cape Town, particularly in the situation where we've got a problem of transport, where the railway lines are not working, because our buses are full to the capacity. And every time we report this matter to the city of Cape Town, they are telling us about the budget. Lastly, from the PRT point of view, what is happening in George? It's our concern. Because now, if you remember, the shareholders of Go George are the former taxi people. Now the conflict is between the taxi industry together, the Go George, and all those people are residing in one community. Therefore, our question from National PRT organization is that what role is government playing to unite those people? Is government dividing those people deliberately to pursue that understanding? The more you divide them, the more you can conquer them. Or are there any plans for the taxi industry together with the Go George shareholders to come together around the table so that there can be amicable solution? Because what is happening in Go George, it can easily happen here in Cape Town. And we need to try to avert that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other person or persons who'd like to pose a question? Okay, thank you. There's no further questions. I'm going to hand over to the minister, but he will decide as to how there will be a response to the questions posed by Andile. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for the questions. Luckily, in the room, we have experts on Go George. We have people who've been working. But if I can just say on your last point, we were in a meeting in George a few weeks ago. And we're also in another meeting in George this coming Monday. And I must say, all the attempts so far has not been about dividing anyone. It's about bringing people together. There's no transport system in the world that can function if people start killing each other. I've never seen it. Not on this planet. There's none. The only way transport system functions is if they work together. I used to stay in Steenberg. And from Steenberg, I took a taxi from Steenberg to a retreat station. In the morning, I took a train from Retreat to Cape Town. Then I took a taxi from Cape Town station to Sea Point. Similarly, back in the day, I used to work at a place called Spek and Hum in a place called Bellville. I used to take a taxi to Melton Road station, take a train from Melton Road to Bellville station, and then a bus from from Bellville station, sometimes a train from Bellville station through to Stikland. So that system existed. Integrated public transport system. For some reason, over the last 10 years, or even more so, somewhere somebody got planted in their head that if you kill the trains, the taxis and the bus will survive. If you kill the taxis, the bus and the trains will survive. If you kill the bus, the taxis and the trains will survive. I don't know who did it, and I can only presume why they did it, but the system has existed for decades where the buses, the trains, and the taxis operated together, and I have traveled with that without fail for many years. 2 different lines. Southern Line, Steenberg, Retreat, Cape Town, Sea Point. Northern Line, taxi to Melton Road to Bellville train, Bellville bus to Stikland. It existed. And that is the system we need to get back together. That was my discussion with Santaco. That was my discussion with the leadership of Santaco to say, I don't know what has happened the last 10 years, but somewhere somebody has got into the heads of individual taxi businessmen that if the one system don't exist, that system will become rich. If this system don't exist, that system don't become rich. It doesn't work that way. If the systems are integrated, everybody benefits. Example, the violence on the B97, it turned people away from public transport. A friend of mine has not gotten back on public transport because they're scared of the violence that existed. So you've taken people on the road and they refuse to use any mode of public transport, whether it's a bus, whether it's a taxi, or the trains when they existed. So when you have violence and intimidation and whoever's responsible for it, which, unless you're convicted, we can't put the finger on it. It chases people away from public transport. So the sooner we realize that, all stakeholders in the taxi industry or in the train industry or in the bus industry, the sooner we realize, the quicker we work together. If the central lines come back, people will take a train from Mitchell's Plain. How is the people going to get from Tafelshof to Mitchell's Plain? The taxi, there's no train system going to Mitchell's Plain. Westeries, Easteries, there's a new call center being built in Lentegeur. R Labs just built a beautiful building up in Westeridge. The people are going to get from R Labs to Mitchell's Plain station if we have taxis there. Simple. People don't want to sit in traffic for 2 hours. The only way it will work if there's an integrated public transport system. That's why I'm so happy the professionals here, and I'm 100% in agreement with, we have to get the taxi industry up to scratch. Like I said earlier, I don't know how that model looks like. I don't know how we're going to fund them, but you cannot shy away from the fact that the taxi industry needs help. The taxi industry needs assistance to get them up to the level so that they can rightfully work with the train system and with the bus system to deliver people to work. That's the only way it's going to work. So you're speaking to somebody who's sold on that product because I loved that product. No one needs to sell to me that we need to assist the taxi industry more because I've lived that product. So I know it can work. I know it will work. We will have to find a way to make it work. On the technical, so for the Go George, there is no one's interest to start for the Go George in the taxi industry to start fighting. A bus was burned 2 weeks ago. 14 people were in hospital, 11 severely burned. I went to visit a guy who was on his way to work that morning. That's all he did. He was on his way to work. You must see his face. It looks horrible. It's in no business interest for somebody who was on his way to work to be burned on his way to work. It makes no sense. A day later, Mr. Mbudede was murdered. It's in no one's interest for a leader of the taxi industry to be murdered. So it's in no one's interest to divide anyone because there is no benefit. Because tomorrow can be you or it's going to be me, it's going to be any of them. Because the thugs, the criminal elements in any industry will come after you, me, because we're disrupting their business. But businessmen, whether it's in the taxi industry, whether it's chartered accountant, lawyers, it doesn't matter who they are, wants to wake up in the morning and make money. That is what they're there for. They are businessmen. So we need to work with them to ensure their businesses succeed. So it's in no one's interest to fuel or divide anyone in jobs. It makes no sense because a town cannot survive with commuters that cannot get to work. You can create 1 million jobs, but if people can't get to work, what's the point? Makes no sense. So our interest is to ensure that people get to work safely, and we will work hard to whatever we need to do to ensure the support that the taxi industry needs to ensure people get to work. Like I said, at this point, I don't know how that model is going to look like. We're going to have to argue, and I've got officials on my side who can argue that point wisely because they understand it. Because sometimes I don't think people have experienced a particular way that they might say no or yes, but if they've experienced it, they'll have a different perception of what it needs to be done. And we will work hard to make it happen. I can assure you that. So from our perspective, there's definitely no one's interest to divide the industry. It makes no sense. The second part of your question on the N2 Express, did you say the buses of the N2 Express are full? I didn't hear that last part. Which buses? Oh, the My City buses. It's full. Yeah. Waiting.
Because it means more diesel, more maintenance. Whereas government does not feel it because they don't pay us as if things are normal.
Okay. On that part, I don't know the technical question around that one, and then the legal question on the My City as well. I honestly don't know that answer. And then the other part around the role of expanding the My City, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'll ask the officials to give some guidance on that. Thanks.
I think I'll start with the Go George, Mr. Peters, because that's the one I know better. You mentioned that there's a fight, seems like there's a fight between Go George and the taxi operators. Well, I don't believe that to be true. Because the taxi operators, the affected operators that must still come as shareholders into the business, a lot of them are actually employees in Go George already. And 80% of those guys have relinquished their licenses or started the paperwork. And you know that UNEDO is the affected association that still needs to largely participate. And they have given a letter of support. What has happened is that there is about 70, that we've counted, about 70 legal operators that has now not been associated to an UNEDO, but has affiliated themselves to Godeta. This has been going on from about 2019. It started with about 15 operators, grown quite significantly. The challenge is we've been very clear to industry in the Southern Cape, and specifically in George, we cannot justify any more operating licenses in that area. Now, the next question that gets posed, but you must allow people choice, and that's exactly what we've done. In 2019, we issued another 2018, we issued another 60 licenses. And that was a little bit above what was required. And the town hasn't grown to an extent that justifies any more licenses to be issued. And the issue that we have right now, and this is only speculation, Mr. Peters, is Go George is rolling out the last phase, or the last biggest phase, imminently. And I think when that happens, there is going to be, that illegal operators are going to stand out. So I think that may be the challenge, but it's not, the fight is not with Go George shareholders, which is ex-minibus taxi operators and the minibus taxi operators in George. Well, not the legitimate affected operators. Then in terms of my city, Minister's ability to intervene is via the integrated transport plan when it comes to him to be assessed. The review was done a few months ago. It was the previous minister approved it. And obviously ministers also set up task teams, and there is various engagements that's held with the city of Cape Town. But in terms of the rate per kilometer that is paid and all the different cost elements, I don't believe that that's an area that our minister can intervene with, but he could assist in the engagement between yourselves potentially, because minister loves collaboration. But just in terms of that contractual negotiations, I don't believe he can do anything around that. National has decreased the public transport network grant that pays for this. So it's that grant and fares, and anything else we have to pay for, or the city would have to give the deficit. So the grant, I just want to mention that the grant has decreased.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Ms. Goods. Thank you, Mr. Rabina. Mr. Peter, don't know, do you want to follow up? Okay, good.
Right, thank you very much, Minister, and thank you very much to your team. It gives me comfort that at least we have registered our consent. I think one of the biggest mistakes that the government has done, it was even us in Danunu, we're going to sit with the same problem that George is sitting with. When you introduce us to the BRT, one of the things that you told us, and it was law in terms of government, you need to collapse your taxi industry. And when the BRT started, they started the BRT without enough buses. And by that time, the people were aware that we have been bought out of the taxi industry. And they started having pirate taxis up to a point where they are strong enough, just like in George, because government couldn't do anything to protect the BRT. Now, those pirate taxis now, they are very strong to a point where they need to be recognized. And part of that recognition is to have a conflict of interest together with us as the BRT people. It is the same here in Cape Town. The only way that we could have dealt with Etanun, it was to say, let us maintain our rank. The only thing that we can do now is to absorb them so that we can still lead them. But now the challenge that we are having under the influx and the overcrowded pirate taxis, together with my city every morning in Danun, is an issue of licensing, where we are not allowed as former taxi people that were introduced in the BRT to have taxi licenses again, where the pirate taxis are not allowed to have taxis again. As a result, every day, every month, our taxes are being impounded. We pay 7,000, 10,000 every month, and our families are suffering because now we are working for government in terms of our tax industry. Whereas government cannot give enough buses for the people of City of Cape Town to be transported. Now there's a mushroom of pirate taxis, and we cannot say anything because their understanding was that we have sold our taxi business. Now we are together with them now. We've got the challenges of licenses because the City of Cape Town together with the province are saying no to the taxi licenses, whereas there's a demand in terms of that. As a result, every time there's an issue of taxes in Hood Bay, we are affected as the My City people. We are affected, it affects us badly, and we've got nowhere to go. We can't go back to the taxi industry because we have sold our taxis. We are stuck with My City where we don't get joy. Therefore, Minister, I'm pleading you, if you can consider and have a look of what is happening around the City of Cape Town in terms of My City. It's painful for us.
Thank you, Mr. Peter. And I think the minister will respond. And the minister has open door policy, and I'm sure he will continue the engagement. But the minister can speak for himself. Thank you.
No, thank you, Chair. I will certainly have a look at it, but I presume, like any other business, you've signed legal contracts with the City of Cape Town as shareholders of that entity. And that's something that I obviously can't interfere with, but I'll definitely take your concerns, because what you don't, and I get the point you're making, and I think perhaps that it's a legacy decision our forefathers has made, because somebody raised that same point the other day. When you brought in the bus services and you removed the legal operators, you created a vacuum. And those illegal operators are now filling that vacuum. So, I mean, we obviously, none of us were around at the time the decision were taken. But yeah, I will have to look at it and see how we can, obviously through law enforcement, work with to rid the illegal operators. But I don't know what the terms and conditions of your license selling point was, that you're not allowed in or not allowed in. Yeah, but it's something that we can have a look on, but I just can't guarantee you any solution at the moment to that problem. But we need to work with organizations in trying to solve the transport problem in the city, and we'll work with anyone that wants to work with us. That I can guarantee you.
So thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Peter. Thank you, Mr. David. I think that, Minister, that vacuum that you were referring to was sort of exacerbated with the collapse of the rail system. Yeah, certainly. But be that as it may, we have come to the end of our meeting, colleagues. It's been a very fruitful and illuminating engagement with the department and the officials. Thank you so much. And as the minister was saying, is that oftentimes, or sometimes, or most of the times, we don't have a conceptual idea as to the amount of work that goes into presenting a budget here, and it doesn't start 3 months ago. It started, many months ago, many months. So for all your hard work on behalf of the committee, I'd like to express our heartfelt appreciation and gratitude for what you're doing for the residents of the Western Cape. And also, it has not been an easy year for the department, given the uncertainty that was created with the establishment of the new department, because with the old department, there was a lot of complexity, and all of that complexity needed to be sort of untangled and to create a department that certainly will fulfill a new mandate. And on top of it, you got a new ministers, and again a new minister, and Minister Mackenzie. From us as the committee, we're looking forward to working with you, and we wish you all the success in leading this department to achieve the goals and objectives that has been set out in the budget and within your strategic plans for the upcoming year. And as they say, we have refreshments outside, and usually we would have broken early for a break, but I thought that it's enthusiastic participation of the members. I didn't want to interrupt the train of thought. But there are sort of refreshments, please, on your way out. You can indulge, and all the best for the new year. And the committee will remain behind because we're not finished with our agenda yet. We will then continue with the agenda within the next 3 minutes. Thank you, Ms. Good, Minister, team. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, colleagues online, are you still with us? Honorable Vimby, Honorable van der Westhuizen, tot ziens. Goodbye. Okay. Honorable van der Westhuizen, are you still there, Honorable Vimby?
Yes, Chairperson.
Great, fantastic. Colleagues, the next item on the agenda is resolutions. Honorable Vimby, I knew that we had members of the public present, and I was going to give them an opportunity to pose the questions.
My apologies.
No need. I thought that maybe I don't want to create an inference that you have mobilized people to come here and pose questions. But be that as it may, colleagues, any resolutions? Okay, going once.
May I, Chair?
Yes, Honorable van der Westhuizen, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask that we get a breakdown from the department.
Just speak up a little.
That we ask the department for a breakdown of all the fines issued over the current and the previous 2 financial years by the law enforcement arm of the department. We've heard that apparently the collection rate is quite low and that that money goes to municipalities. But I think for me, it's important to see whether the investment in law enforcement has paid dividends. So if we could just get the total figures for the last 3 years of fines issued. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable van der Westhuizen. That's very well. I don't know if you can remember, last year we had a report of in the annual financial report, we had a report of the license collection fees of the various municipalities and what the department pays back to them as an agency for collecting the license fees. You remember that report? And in Beaufort West was hardly any money was paid to them because they didn't collect any fees. And then we posed a question as a resolution then to get a report on that, but we haven't received that yet, Jan. Can you just follow up there? And because there's a relation between it. Thank you, Honorable van der Westhuizen. Any other resolutions like to? Yes, Isaac, please proceed.
Chair, it's a very difficult one, but the issue of that within the industry it's a legacy issue. And I think what we need the department to come and brief us in terms of ways and plans, how they are going to, try to resolve, or try to have proactive steps in trying to avoid, people being killed, because there's conflict amongst taxi owners, because it's one that is enough, and this seems to happen, every year, and we seem not to be, winning that fight. And one would want to know whether the department, has plans or ways to mitigate, and try to deal with this matter of conflict, amongst the taxi, owners, and yeah.
Yeah, I have a resolution also, Johan, and that is the pedestrian road safety strategy. Just a report on the implementation of there's a copy of the strategy, if possible, and a report on the implementation of that strategy up to date. And then secondly, also report on the passenger voucher system. Just just a comprehensive report on the conceptualization and the potential implementation, anything around the voucher system. Colleagues, any other resolutions that you might have?
Chairperson?
Yes, Honorable Mbambe?
Yes, it might be one that we are familiar with. I don't know whether it might still be coming, because I remember during our annual reports, when we're looking at it, the issue about I know the previous chairperson, who's now the current minister, was quite passionate about it. And kind of also supported it to be presented at some point to the committee. The issue of the Safely Home project. If members can recall that at some point, I remember I made an example that I only have seen only one banner or a post of a Safely Home. It's only when I come in from the Southern Cape into Strand, when you drive into Strand or Somerset West, there will be a board there that says Safely Home. But then I remember the
signage.
The signage is. Then I remember the officials gave a long explanation about the project. Then it was resolved that can we have maybe a full report around the project itself? What does it entails really?
So, no, Mbambe, thank you for that. You recall that we had a resolution at the end of last year with the annual reports. Similar, can we ask you just to revisit that? And if not, and then we can submit it as a new resolution. Is it okay with you?
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Any other resolutions, colleagues?
Chair?
Okay, thank you so much.
Sorry, Chair.
Then we have just two more things to do. Honorable Mbambe? Van der Westhuizen, sorry, Andricus?
Yes. Chair, this is linking on to what I think the Honourable Sileko raised. We keep on hearing from the taxi industry that they are extremely unhappy that they are being sent from pillar to post if they want to legalize their transport, etc. And we today heard that apparently there's now a special unit in the Provincial Department of Mobility to try and iron out those problems. That together with the input that we've received from the member of the public today, we cannot just ignore that. And I think if I can ask that to take a resolution to ask the department to come and inform us of things like the number of applications, the turnaround times for those applications, any backlogs that there may still be, etc. And perhaps then thereafter invite the taxi associations once we've got the facts. But can we be served with the facts specifically for the city of Cape Town in terms of permits, etc.?
So thank you, Hendrikus. Last year, you asked the minister what his 100-day plan is. No, joking. Right, okay, colleagues, and it's just two more things, and that is whether we need to decide whether we're going to support the vote. And then if we do, or whatever, then we need to adopt the report, and then we're done. Pity our members that online is not here because we have some delicious refreshments outside that is waiting on us. So, colleagues, I pose the question. Do we support vote 8, and that is the budget of the Department of Mobility? Can I have a mover? Or I recognize Honorable Seleku.
I move, Chair.
Honorable Seleku move that we support the vote. Is there a seconder?
Support.
Thank you, Honorable van der Westhuizen. Now that we have
Chairperson, can I just, in terms of Rule 90, while I know that the report by the majority has been supported, that the minority be reflected as not supporting the.
Okay. Noted. Thank you, Honorable Mbambi. We will bring about the sort of notice onto the report, and it was quickly done. It's just you did that. Okay, colleagues. So I have the report here in front of me now, and I'll read it into the record. Is that committee report? Report of the Standing Committee on Transport and Public Works on Vote 8 Mobility in the schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill B2/2023 dated 16 March 2023, as follows, : The Standing Committee on Transport and Public Works, having deliberated on the subject of Vote 8 Mobility in the schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill B2/2023, referred to the committee in accordance with Standing Rule 188, reports that it supports the vote. In accordance with Standing Rule 90, the African National Congress expressed its minority view that it does not support the vote. Colleagues, are we in agreement with the report as read into the record?
Yes,
thank you, Honorable
Agreed. Chairperson.
Unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. So, colleagues, that brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you so much for your participation and engagement with the officials. And I think that they appreciate it very much, that your robust engagement. It's an indication that their hard work hasn't gone unnoticed. And I am very appreciative of that. May you have a pleasant evening further, and then when we see each other again in another meeting at another time. Thank you, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Honorable van der Westhuizen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Nomfundo. Bye.
Thank you, colleagues.